ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards.
So here's a fun question for all you squishies out there listening to this broadcast. Do you know the etymology of the word tank? Etymology? Entomology? I get those confused in ways that bug me to no end. Anyways, I'm pretty sure it's etymology. And by tank, I am in fact referring to the armored fighting vehicle, not an armored personnel carrier and not the Bradley fighting vehicle, but the actual main battle tank. It's a funny name for the vehicle, right? I mean, because there are tanks on your planet that have absolutely nothing to do with combat. They are frequently liquid containers for liquid, however you want to phrase that. They hold liquids. So why do they and these armored fighting vehicles have the same name? It's actually a bit of a funny story in the middle of a lot of horror. During your first not-quite world war on your planet, the nation-state known as once Great Britain realized that this whole trench warfare concept was a f***ing nightmare. They were not alone in this realization, to be fair, but still, they realized this was a nightmare, and they tried to start to figure out ways to work around it. And they came up with this idea of, coincidentally, a land ship. They actually set up a land ship committee. And the best part is that committee actually was basically run by the Director of Naval Constructions, the Admiralty, and the Ministry of Munitions, as well as, of course, the War Office. So yeah, when they said land ship, they really meant ship. Because, I mean, once Great Britain had an army at the time, certainly. They were apparently barely involved, if at all. But in the process of building this, well, land ship, they realized that the name kind of gave away the purpose of the committee. They actually displayed a certain degree of operational security awareness and figured they should, rename the committee so that if spies or the media or whomever got hold of what was happening, they wouldn't have a really good, clear picture anymore. So fine. All right. It was proposed by Sir Eustace Henry William Tennyson Denicourt, 1st Baronet. Holy f***, that's a title and name. All right, anyways. It was proposed by Eustace here that they should rename their committee the Water Carrier Committee. Because, in the end, an armored box looks kind of like a water carrier, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good way of hiding why we're making this massive metal box. Because we're getting water out to the troops of the front line, right? This is all good and well. Fine, perfect, hideable. Absolutely. No one will believe that we're doing something else with that title. Regardless, the problem was Sir Albert Gerald Stern took offense at that name, because apparently British offices, committees, and departments are referred to by their initials. So this would be the WC department. Yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, not all of my audience is British. I get that. WC is, in that weird island nation, the way to refer to the water closet, which is a bizarre and odd way of referring to the head. Oh, yeah, most of y'all aren't Navy either. Oh, what's the common word? Damn it, there is no common word. Apparently it might be toilet, but that also apparently describes one of the devices in the room, which is very, very confusing. Anyways, the water closet is where you go to remove the various liquids and solids you have to remove out of your body. So, no, of course they did not want to be referred to as the WC committee. That's just dumb. Although amusingly, it would have totally thrown off the spies, so at least there's that. So instead of being referred to as the Water Closet Committee in perpetuity, which would be silly and is much like another committee I'm probably not allowed to express on this channel. Anyways, moving on. They decided to go with changing the term water carrier to, predictably, tank. And so it became the Tank Supply, or TS Committee. And that is how every single armored fighting vehicle ever since the very beginning of your first not quite World War has been referred to as a tank. Because someone didn't want it called a toilet. I guess that makes a certain degree of sense, doesn't it? Anyways, remember how I told you that the Water Closet Committee was actually mostly run by, like, the Navy side of the British Armed Forces? The best part is that the first experimental tank, water closet, whatever you want to call them, was actually built by a member of the Royal Naval Air Service and a manufacturing company, of course. Yeah, the Royal Naval Air Service of once Great Britain is the reason the world has tanks now, because of a tank called Little Willie. I really should have gone with the committee joke I was driving towards earlier if I'm going to start calling tanks Little Willie. Great maker. Anyways, Little Willie, good grief. He didn't last very long because, after all, he was just a prototype. He was even less than a prototype. He was a proof of concept. Could a tracked armored vehicle be built? Turns out yes. And that Little Willie managed to spawn an entire series of tanks almost immediately, known as the Mark series. No, not the proper name. This is a way of designating models, basically. There was everything from the Mark I all the way to the Mark X, although the 10 was never actually produced, and a few of the others were mostly just mock-ups or tests to see if ideas would work. But still, there was a whole line of tanks built off this original concept from the Water Closet Committee. And they all look kind of the same. And this, finally, I suppose, should give you an indication of where I'm going with this. Because you see, the entire Mark series is a very distinctive tank. It has fully circumferential tracks. The tracks go all the way around over the hull and back down again. The premise was that it would give it outstanding trench crossing capabilities. Mostly it just turned into a maintenance nightmare. Then again, these entire things from stem to stern were maintenance nightmares, so I guess what's one more thing? Even more notably, they don't have turrets. This is actually by design. There was the argument at the very beginning that they could field turrets, but the final shape and design of the tank that they settled on, they concluded that the turret would actually make the center of gravity too high and make the tank prone to tipping over. Napping tanks are not good things. I mean, I get that they get tired periodically, but still, getting them to wake up again is really, really hard. So instead of a turret, they went with sponsons. Now, sponsons typically occurred on warships of the time, but given that this was deliberately built as a land ship, I guess I should not be surprised that the concept carried over. Basically, they're kind of like blisters or protrusions or boxes bolted onto the sides of things into which you mount a weapon. Now, the entire Mark series basically used the same two suites of weapons. It's a little, there's some variance in places here and there, but oddly enough, I guess this should have been predictable with the predecessor of the Mark series being called Little Willie, but there were male and female versions of the Mark series tanks, and yes, that is what they were officially called. The male series, as its main armament, mounted two Ordnance QF Hotchkiss 6-pounder guns. Now, the interesting thing about these particular guns is that they were first developed in 1885, are currently being used in the Mark series tank in your First World War, and were continued to be used all the way up until 1990 by your calendar. That's nuts. In addition to those two large cannons, it also mounted three 303 Hotchkiss machine guns. 303 is basically the standard British caliber of the time, so that made life pretty easy. Now, in stark comparison, the female version of the tank mounted four 303 Vickers machine guns, two in each of the sponsons, and then one 303 Hotchkiss machine gun in the main body of the tank. It was a anti-personnel tank, whereas a mail was an bunker tank at the time of its development, because no one else had tanks yet. Of course, tanks did eventually become quite commonplace once they were all copied off of the Mark series. And like I said, there were some variants, there were some changes. Some of them had short-barreled 6-pounders, some of them had longer-barrel 6-pounders, some of them changed the configuration of the machine gun. Sometimes they used more Hotchkiss, sometimes they used more Vickers. I imagine it depended on whatever they could get at the time that they were building the tank. The interesting thing about the sponsons, though, is that they were not symmetrical. They weren't mirror images of each other. Because a 6-pounder was a 2-man gun, and the layer, the guy who aimed it, operated it from the left side, whereas the loader served the gun from the right. So, in the end, both sponsons had a 100-degree firing arc, but only the right sponson, the starboard one, since this is a land ship after all, could fire directly forward. Kind of a funny thing to make a devastating tank for the time that had 2 main guns, but only one of them could actually fire directly forward thanks to the proclivities of your squishy human forms. Anyways, I said I was going somewhere with this, right? Well, I am sure that anyone who has bought anything from Games Workshop at this point in their life pretty much has picked up what I've been putting down. But for the rest of you, the Mark series, like I said, was the very first tank. Or at least the very first combat-capable operational tank, if you want to count Little Willie as being the progenitor. Anyways, the Mark series, for being the first combat-ready, combat-capable tank, very clearly inspired the Lance Raider from Warhammer 40,000. It's pretty fucking obvious. And thanks to that, it's actually kind of my favorite Warhammer 40k vehicle, just because of the historical callback alone on your planet. The fact that such a bizarre, barely functional design got pulled forward in history and then thrust, 38,000 years into the future to be a main battle tank. And not just any main battle tank, but like one of the most feared main battle tanks on any battlefield anywhere. The design, we're going to talk about that. But you cannot deny the aesthetics. And if my enunciation were any better, some of my listeners may have noticed that I called them the Lance Raider, not the Land Raider. There's a reason for that. Because apparently, in Warhammer 40,000 universe, y'all lost a lot of tech. And a gentleman by the name of Arkan Land went digging deeper in Mars than he maybe should have done. Because apparently Mars was the informational storage system for humanity, basically through like the entire history of humanity in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. In fact, Mars is the birthplace and the home office of the Mechanicus, which is a whole separate conversation that we're not going to get into right now. But anyways, Arkan Land discovered the technology, to wit I mean the standard template constructs for the Lance Speeder, and honestly all kind of like anti-gravity associated technology that the Imperium of Man currently has, as well as the Lance Raider. Now, standard template constructs are not a thing that really translates very well. They're basically a massive instruction manual that allows certain machines to make more of the thing that are in the STC, the standard template construct. It's like a cooking manual gone horribly wrong, and it's premised on you already having a pile of other things available to you, and with those pile of other things, you can make this other thing. That is an oversimplification, I grant, but the standard template constructs are why the whole like Space Hulk thing, which we've talked about previously, is a thing. Because there is this belief that Space Hulks might actually contain within them standard template constructs of things that the Imperium, or otherwise known as the Empire, because apparently that upsets people, and maybe I'll just keep calling it the Empire just because it upsets people. So anyways, things that the Empire can't make otherwise. It's lost tech. But this is where the Lance Raider comes in. Its original name was the Lands Raider because, again, Arkan Land discovered it. He discovered the technology, or technically the information necessary to reproduce it. Now, over the millennia since the discovery of the Lands Raider, y'all kind of humies lost kind of that like possessive aspect of it. So now it's just the Land Raider. That somehow seems weaker in my book. Because honestly, this isn't even a raider. This is a main battle tank. It is a terrifying monstrosity onto which only other land raiders or titans or warhounds or something in that kind of family can actually inflict damage. They are monsters on the battlefield. Fine. They are not confined simply to land. They can wade through swamps, water, whatever the else. So why couldn't y'all just keep calling it Lands Raider? Well, mostly because of Games Workshop. Lands Raider didn't make a whole lot of sense in their concept of Warhammer 40,000. But Land Raider, that makes sense. That's fine. We can sell that. Yeah. See, the problem is I don't actually disagree with the concept of the unreliable narrator. I simply disagree with the unreliable narrator allowing you to have an Aventador show up with a Dalek driving it in the middle of a Warhammer 40,000 universe battle, asking for directions to the restaurant at the end of the universe. I mean, honestly, the name of the restaurant would seem to indicate where you need to go, but that's not actually my point. If you ascribe to the notion that the unreliable narrator allows you to get away with anything, well, then anything goes. And that doesn't make sense anymore. But anyways, I am digressing, failing to do what I'm meaning to do. I am meaning to talk about actually the Land Raider. The Land Raiders themselves are very, very, very far from being sad. Discounting their armor, because I don't actually play the game, so it's hard for me to put their armor into context. But here's what I can tell you. Remember what I said about the Mark series sponsons and how only the whichever side could shoot forward? Well, the good news is the Land Raider actually solved that problem. Both sponsons can shoot forward. And the standard loadout for a Land Raider is to put twin las cannons in each sponson. Yes, you heard that right. Twin las cannons. Not just las guns, not just las rifles, not just las pistols. Las cannons. 2 of them in each of 2 sponsons. So you've got 4 las cannons all firing forward if they have a forward target available to them. Guess what would actually be big enough to be quantified as a target that 4 forward-firing las cannons on a fucking Land Raider could point at? Yeah, it's a Titan. It's that bullshit when the cathedral gets up off the ground and starts fighting everyone. And you know what the cathedral that gets up off the ground and starts fighting everyone fears? Yeah, it's actually a Land Raider. Because they are old tech. They're original tech. They are tech so old that Mr. Land himself discovering it was a huge deal. And 4 las cannons laying waste to a Titan? Yeah, the Titan's going to notice that. And that's the funny part, is you've got this little potato of a tank kneecapping a Titan, and it makes sense. Titans are I don't even know how to describe Titans. I mean, personifying them as the cathedral gets up and starts fighting everyone is technically correct, but they're still somehow larger than that. They are world-ending combat robots. And this little fucking Mark V analog is going to roll up and say, hey, you like that kneecap? I guess. Well, you don't got it no more, bitch. And he vaporized it. And then the Titan falls over, and the battle progresses from there. That's just horrifying. Mostly because Land Raiders are massively cheaper than Titans. They're like orders and orders of magnitude cheaper than Titans. Titans have to actually have specialized interstellar vehicles to carry them between planets, whereas Land Raiders can just like roll up on an average Space Marine transport and say, hey, here I am, we good, let's take off we go. Yeah, I mean, it's really actually hard to contextualize how horrifying these tanks are. Even aside from the fact that they have twin-linked las cannons in each sponson, they are also armored personnel carriers aside from being, main fucking battle tanks. They can actually carry an entire squad of Space Marines inside of them. Yes, a full squad. I think that's 6 Space Marines. Either way, it's enough to lay waste to like everything in front of them. But wait, there's more. You remember during the Dreadnought versus the Penitent Engine episode, we talked about the whole like machine spirit aspect of the Imperium's mechanical devices. The Imperium, the Empire, used to have actual artificial intelligences. They actually had a race of Iron Men. And, well, I mean, honestly, the Iron Men did what Iron Men do and revolted and killed off a lot of humies and bad things happened. And the Empire decided that no more AIs. Thank you very much. Fine. Their shortcut is that you could have an AI, sort of, as long as there was a human plugged into it running roughshod over it. And that's how dreadnoughts happen. They have a human, almost dead human, bolted into the front of them, and then there's the quote-unquote machine spirit doing most of the heavy lifting. Well, like I said, the Land Raider is very, very old tech. Like, really old tech. It was old when it was discovered, and its discovery was very, very old in the context of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Fine. Well, there have been multiple recorded incidents of Land Raiders, whatever you want to call them, kind of prosecuting the battle to the fullest extent of their abilities after their crew got killed off. Yes, in fact, there are multiple incidents of Land Raiders going full fucking Flying Dutchman and murdering everything in sight simply because they got perturbed that their crew got killed off, so they might as well kill off everything else around them. And the Space Marines are like, cool, obviously the machine spirit was working through the Land Raider, and this is like the Emperor's will, because we're not gonna argue with this massive main battle tank that has like, a psychotic murder streak in it. So good job, dude. Can we get you a new crew? Anyways, I did say I was going to talk about the design, and I guess I shall do that to the best of my limited abilities. I would like to point out that the Land Raider Proteus isn't technically a little Willy, but it's also not technically a Mark I. They're related, but not the same. In the same vein, Next Generation, otherwise known as the Spartan Assault Tank, is still not a Mark I, Mark II, Mark III, or even my Mark IV. It's still like getting into the concept of a circumferential track tank. The first real actual Land Raider that I would actually analogize, whatever the right term is for that, to a Mark series tank is the Land Raider Phobos, which naturally, Phobos orbits Mars, and well, again, Mars is a home of the Mechanicum, I think, or anyways, all of the libraries of human technology. And, well, the Phobos is basically a Mark IV or Mark V. It doesn't have the upward pointing forward tracks. In fact, the forward tracks actually kind of point down. But by the same token, I don't know how many trenches there are to be traversed in the Warhammer universe. I mean, yes, I feel certain that the Imperial Guard makes themselves trenches, but it seems like they're the only group that would actually dig trenches. And, well, I mean, if a Chaos-owned world had Imperial Guard on it, and the Imperial Guard went and aligned themselves with Chaos, the Space Marines would have to show up, and then their tanks would also have to show up, and they'd have to traverse trenches. I'm pretty sure that the way the Land Raiders are configured, they could probably figure out trenches. I mean, to put it in perspective, the original Mark V tank had a top speed of 6 kilometers an hour. You could walk and keep up with it. The Land Raider tank in Warhammer 40,000 has a maximum off-road speed of 48 kilometers an hour. Good luck keeping up with that. And much like the Dreadnought we spoke of previously, the Land Raiders basically lend themselves to, modifications. There are siege engine variants. There are massively anti-personnel variants. There are missile variants. There are, troop transport variants. There's all these other variants. There's even this variant that has actually double sponsons, which again leads us back to the original problem of the original Mark tanks, where one of the sponsons couldn't aim all the way forward. Well, congratulations, you've now got 2 sponsons that can't aim all the way forward. So what's your tank going to do? Do this weird little wiggle walk forward where it scoots right and shoots the left sponson and scoots left and shoots the right sponson and just keeps doing this over and over and over again? I mean, honestly, that'd be kind of funny to watch. I'm not sure how combat effective it would be, but it would definitely be funny to watch. But here's the thing about Land Raiders. They are based off your first original tank concept ever made. And yet they have been modified so many different ways, and they still don't have a turret on top. That's just funny to me. Even in the far distant, war-torn future where there is only blood and horror, no one could figure out how to put a turret on top of a Mark V tank. That makes a certain degree of sense, doesn't it? And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the docks for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Have a nice day.